Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
You know, I had resisted doing a broadcast about the Orlando shooting. Not because it wasn't hugely important, but because, number one, I was rushing current deadlines to try to get out the door. In fact, I'm leaving in just a few hours, going through, I'll be in Louisiana, going to Alabama, going to Florida, doing a couple of tour stops, finishing that speech, finishing the Loftus interview for next week, finishing the edit on the God of Cancer speech. All this stuff has to be done. I was just sort of drowning in my inbox. And secondly, I had been reading and watching the commentary by so many others out there who just said it better. You know, they had articulated already. You know, I felt like I had not much to add, but I was encouraged that I should take a second and sort of give you my thoughts. And I've decided to do one better. I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts, but mostly I would like to read for you some of the perspectives of other people that have informed my own position and reflect my own position and may reflect yours. When these things happen, these horrible tragedies happen, we see people automatically rushing to blame one thing. This is human nature in many cases, I think. It's easy to say, it's Islam. And in many ways, we're right. It's easy to scream guns and gun control. That's the problem. And in many ways, we're right. We cry homophobia, transphobia. And in many ways, we're right. A culture of bigotry. Is it mental illness? Is it simple zealotry? Is it something else? Well, in many ways, you may be right. How many millions of steps led to the entrance of the nightclub that night? How many influences, how many internal and external forces were at play to create this unbelievable, unspeakable act of hatred? The first encouragement I have for people is to resist speaking about this thing in bumper stickers. Already I can see there is probably a group of people in the comments section that are expecting me to be some sort of an Islam apologist. I see this from time to time, and I've never understood it. I just never understood it. We challenge Islam all the time. I mean, have they seen the interviews that I've done with the direct opponents of Islam, many of them escaping the religion itself firsthand? Faisal Saeed al-Muhtar, Miriam Namazi, Armin Navabi's been on the radio. Muhammad Syed, Sarah Haider. We've done whole shows about Islam, the problems, huge problems with Islam, trying to escape radical Islamic cultures, the nastier verses in the Quran. You can read about that on the blog. You can see evidence of the conversations we've had where Islam certainly never gets a pass. But if you take a second and you decide you're not going to say Islam, capital I, Islam, and then decide that's the end of the discussion, there's a group of people that are automatically going to say, oh, now you're equivocating. Now you're just apologizing. Now you've just whitewashed the whole thing. Now you're scared, you coward. These people do not get it, and they never will get it. They just won't get it. They'll blitter the comment sections and they'll wail and froth and carry on, and they'll miss the point probably for the rest of their lives. Fine. At least here in the United States, you have a constitutional right to be clueless. It's kind of sad and it's irritating to many of the rest of us, but fine. Many of us refuse to look at Orlando and paint it with a huge, clumsy brush and then just decide, well, that's it. Solve this one thing and all your problems are gone. It's just not how it works. It's monumentally frustrating to watch Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump right after the tragedy in the tweet where he says, "Hey, thanks for the congratulations, folks. Thanks for congratulating me for being right about Islam." What was he right about? What did he say that was so monumentally prescient? Radical Islam is a threat. Well, really? Stop the presses. I mean, a 10-year-old could have predicted that a radical Islamist or an Islamist group or some rogue acting in the name of radical Islam was going to do something terrible somewhere at some point. You know, why all the backslapping? This is not news. Human history is filled with people doing horrible things in horrible ways. The difference is today they exist in the era of the automatic weapon, of the nuclear weapon. The stakes are so much higher. But there have always been horrible people doing horrible things for horrible reasons. I mean, it's so irritating to watch Trump. Just the self-congratulatory, monumentally narcissistic, self-absorbed. In the wake of the horrible death of 49 and the wounding of many others, he wants to talk about himself. Ugh. As if President Obama or the vast majority of politicians and citizens pretty much around the world don't already realize radical Islam is a threat. Islam on some level is a problem everywhere. Religious thinking, especially those who are thinking and acting in the name of God, is a real problem. This is not news. Fortunately, we are seeing more reasonable, more tempered, more compassionate voices out there. I was encouraged to see the statement by the Lieutenant Governor of Utah, Spencer Cox. He was speaking at that vigil on Monday night to honor the victims and survivors. And I'll just read you a portion of what he had said. He said, "I'm here because yesterday morning 49 Americans were brutally murdered, and it made me sad, and it made me angry, and it made me confused. I'm here because those 49 people were gay. I'm here because it shouldn't matter. But I'm here because it does. I'm not here to tell you that I know exactly what you're going through. I'm not here to tell you that I feel your pain. I don't pretend to know the depths of what you're feeling right now, but I do know what it feels like to be scared. And I do know what it feels like to be sad. And I do know what it feels like to be rejected. And more importantly, I know what it feels like to be loved. I grew up in a small town and went to a small rural high school. There were some kids in my class that were different. Sometimes I wasn't kind to them. I didn't know it at the time, but I now know that they were gay. I will forever regret not treating them with the kindness, dignity, and respect, the love that they deserved. For that, I sincerely and humbly apologize. Over the intervening years, my heart has changed. It's changed because of you. It has changed because I've gotten to know many of you. You've been patient with me. You helped me learn the right letters of the alphabet in the right order, even though you keep adding new ones. You've been kind to me. Jim DeBacchus even told me I dressed nice once, even though I know he was lying. You've treated me with the kindness, dignity, and respect, the love that I very often did not deserve, and it has made me love you. But now we are here. We are here because 49 beautiful, amazing people are gone. These are not just statistics. These were individuals. These are human beings. They each have a story. They each had dreams, goals, talents, friends, family. They are you, and they are me. And one night they went out to relax, to laugh, to connect, to forget, to remember. And in a few minutes of chaos and terror, they were gone. I believe that we can all agree we've come a long way as a society when it comes to our acceptance and understanding of the LGBTQ community. And he says, did I get that right? However, there's been something about this tragedy that has very much troubled me. I believe that there is a question, two questions actually, that each of us needs to ask ourselves in our heart of hearts. And I'm speaking now to the straight community. How did you feel when you heard that 49 people had been gunned down by a self-proclaimed terrorist? That's the easy question. Here's the hard one. Did that feeling change when you found out the shooting was at a gay bar at 2 a.m. in the morning? If that feeling changed, then we are doing something wrong. So now we find ourselves at a crossroads of hate and terror. How do we respond? How do you respond? Do we lash out with anger, hate, and mistrust, or do we, as Lincoln begged, appeal to the better angels of our nature? Anyway, that is Utah Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox at the vigil just a few nights ago. It's a speech worth reading or watching if you want to look it up. I have seen a few clips from some kind of fringe pastors, Stephen Anderson and others who, let's face it, were kind of celebrating the shooting. I think Stephen Anderson called them 49 less pedophiles in the world, something like that. YouTube removed his video for hate speech, but the speech is still out there in some form. And there are those people who are co-opting this for their own ends. You know, it's part of their end times narrative, the whole world's going to hell narrative. It's just crazy to think this way. You know, Cox had mentioned in his speech the better angels of our nature, which is part of the Steven Pinker book title, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined. And he statistically is able to show us that we are actually living in a hugely peaceful time relative to the rest of human history. This is not a narrative that many people will accept right now because emotions are charged. I spoke about this in a speech I gave in Australia last year called The Good Old Days. It's hard for us when we are in the face of horror to accept the reality, the statistical reality that we are less warlike, we are less violent, we have less poverty, we have less hunger, we have less misery, we are happier today, we are more civilized today as a species than we have ever been. It's hard to buy that in the wake of this horrible event in Orlando, Florida, and so many like it. There will always be the agents of chaos throughout human history. They've always existed. They've always existed. They've always been there. And they always will be. The difference is that now, today, they exist in the era of the automatic weapon. You know, the nuclear weapon. The stakes are so much higher because they can do so much more damage. One person can accomplish so much more destruction single-handedly now than one person could 500 years ago. And it makes the whole world feel like it's on fire sometimes. I get tired of those who are co-opting this event for some kind of end times narrative. It happens every single fucking time. I'm tired of people trying to solve the problem with bumper stickers. Because one line, one piece of legislation, one Facebook meme, one White House petition, one statement, one idea, one word is not going to solve all this. The challenge we face is, it's monumental. Monumental. The fact that our world is more civilized than it's ever been doesn't mean that there isn't insanity and just evil out there. I like to use the word evil to describe actions. There are some people out there who do evil things. Of course, this is when somebody looks at me and says, well, how do you know it's evil if you don't believe in God? Now, how do you know that the massacre of 49 people at a nightclub in Orlando is evil if you're an atheist? Just shut up already. Your ignorance of evolved moral and ethical systems is not my problem. And your argument for morality, for the objective moral standard, isn't even a theistic argument anyway. While you're pitching Jesus or whatever deity you're painting into the cracks, you're actually talking about some nebulous other out there that established the standard. This is not a theistic argument. You're not even selling your God. You're ignoring the fact that the more secular nations all around the world are largely the most peaceful nations on planet Earth. Not the most religious ones, the most secular ones are the ones that are the least miserable and the more peaceful and the more prosperous and the more balanced. It's awesome. Goodness, no God required. Was religion in some way a motivating factor for this heinous crime in Orlando, Florida? It sure looks like it, and the religion is Islam. Of course, at the moment of this recording, we're still awash in conjecture and speculation, and the evidence is still sort of being pinned down. Was he an agent of ISIS, or was he just a rogue who decided to align himself with ISIS or some other radical group or idea? Was he Islamic? Was he gay? What about his batshit crazy father and his radical ideas? Yeah, religion absolutely has to be part of this discussion. Islam absolutely has to be part of this discussion. What else should be part of this discussion? There's an Iranian blogger who commented on the shooting. He goes by the pseudonym Kaba Misabi. He is, I think, a former Muslim. He's an atheist now. He has a Pathos blog called On the Margin of Error. He wrote a June 15th article called Orlando Shooting, the Sinful Executioner. And I read his article, and then I posted it on my social media pages, and I'd like to read it for you here, because I think he sums it up pretty well. He is providing a tempered perspective with a nuanced eye on a very complex issue that affects all of us, and I like the way he phrased his position and his perspective on the Orlando event. His article says this week a shooting happened in the American city of Orlando. A Muslim American man of Afghani descent targeted an LGBT club and killed more than 50 people. It is, of course, a devastating attack, and my heart goes out to all people who were affected by it. Thoughts and prayers don't work. Neither do shifting the blame. Yes, it's about Islam. Yes, it's about the Muslim community. Yes, it's about the undercurrent homophobia and transphobia of the American culture. Yes, it's even about the recent advances of LGBT made recently and the reaction of a committed homophobe to the events. Yes, it's about guns. Yes, it's about the global dominance of Islamic terrorism, which might inspire radical Islamists to carry out such attacks. Yes, it's about toxic masculinity. Yes, it's also about Islamophobia and putting the Muslim minority of the West in a besieged position. It's about all of these things. Such events are not caused by a single cause. If we really want to reform the society and reduce atrocities like these, we need to realize that these problems are the extreme manifestation of much more prevalent social ills, and we need to address all those ills. Sadly, it seems that most people engaged in the debates aroused in the aftermath of the atrocity are eager to make people not discuss one of these causes, and that is not helpful. While some conservatives are usually adamant to say that the guns or homophobia and transphobia play no role, some liberals are eager to claim that Islam and the general culture of the Muslim communities around the globe are blameless. I disagree with both of these assertions. But today I'm not here to argue that. Better people than me have argued those things already. I'm here to argue about one specific case. We know that Omar Mateen was not very knowledgeable about Islamic terror groups. He'd pledged allegiance to ISIS, Hezbollah, Taliban, and al-Nusra, which are all enemy groups at war with each other. One is even Shia. We know he had multiple accounts on different gay apps. We know he had visited the Pulse Club multiple times before, although he might have been looking for victims instead of lovers from the beginning. We knew he drank a lot of alcohol. Many people, including some Muslim apologists, such as Yasir Qadi on his Facebook page, have used these facts to claim he was not a real Muslim. Therefore, you can't blame his actions on his ideology. But to me, that's a simplification of the complexity of human characteristics and a profound misunderstanding of how radical Muslims work. Being hypocritical does not make your beliefs any less genuine. or your extremism any less extreme. I've known my fair share of Basijis, paramilitary Islamists who help Islamic Republic enforce the Islamic law and to crush protesters and reformists. They confiscate playing cards and play them themselves. They drink the alcohol they confiscate. They lust after women whom they harass for not abiding to the strict dress code. And many of them are closeted gays. Being hypocritical does not make them any less Islamist. It doesn't make their beliefs any less sincere. In fact, all ideologies like this require their most ardent believers to think of themselves as corrupt and sinful. If martyrdom washes all your sins, then it helps to need some washing, you know? Call this ideology whatever you want. Islamism, conservative Islam, traditional Islam, whatever. But the most horrific thing about it is this. It oppresses the executioner and the victim alike. It crushes its enemies and its soldiers. Maybe if Omar Mateen was born into a more open culture, into a family whose father was not a Taliban sympathizer, he might have been less conflicted. If he was LGBT, not conclusively proved at this moment, maybe he could have lived with himself, not driven into self-hatred and others' hatred. Omar Mateen may or may not have been gay or bisexual, but I have known self-hating gay Islamist extremists, known enough of them to know that their Islamism and their faith is more than real. It defines them. It makes them resentful. And the heterosexuals, too. They're angry at the likes of you and me because they see us partaking in things they find sinful and hateful, and they partake in them too, and they hate themselves too. This, to me, is the psychology of the typical religious extremist. Some time ago, I touched on this as I wrote an article called Loose Muslims versus Moderate Muslims. And in that, I pointed out how people often mistake being loose with being a moderate. Apologists look with glee at the sins of the extremists, thinking their sins absolve their own religions of the sins of its toxic ideas. But that is not so. The sins of the executioner only reveal the toxicity of the ideas more clearly. And that's the article Orlando Shooting the Sinful Executioner by Kaveh Misabi. I think he makes some great points. You and I see these headlines and we're horrified. You want to know why? We're horrified because there is still goodness in the world. We grieve and cry and we hold each other and we look around to try to see how it happened and how to prevent it, because there is still goodness in the world. We comfort the grieving. We fight for justice. We fight against bad ideas and try to find and promote good ideas because there is still goodness in the world. A tremendously, unthinkably horrible deed was done in a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, in the month of June 2016. But in the wake of that, I saw people across this planet stand up and defiantly say, we reject this violence, we reject this bigotry, we reject this hatred, we reject this radicalism, we will fight against it. There is still goodness in the world. You're proof of that, I'm proof of that. Everywhere we look, we find proof of that. We see those who embrace good and reject the bad. We see those who want to heal rather than harm. We see those who rush into harm's way to rescue the wounded and comfort the grieving and try to pick up the pieces and try to put this world back together again. Those people exist because there is still goodness in the world. Our thoughts and our efforts continue to be focused on those who are still grieving in Orlando. And while the agents of chaos will always be out there, attempting to define us with the worst, we'll continue to do our best to be vigilant, to pursue solutions to our problems, to continue to work toward a more civilized world, and to continue to foster in others and within ourselves better ideas. A better, a more enlightened, a more civilized, a more compassionate, a more peaceful, a better humanity. Thank you so much for listening.